Good evening to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for July 23rd, 2026. I do know that this is being recorded late in the evening, but I did want to get a video out to you guys today to update you on what is happening in the tropics now. Bertha, Tropical Storm Bertha, has officially moved inland for good after it moved inland over eastern Louisiana yesterday, but kind of briefly went back out over the water in the western Gulf today, but it is now officially inland and is going to rain itself out over the south central U.S. and over Texas for the next few days. So with that being said, let's look at, in today's video, what else is going to happen in the future of the tropics in the Atlantic. Are we going to have any other areas that we need to watch out for in the next coming weeks? And we're also going to take a look at the Pacific too, where things might also get interesting as well, including for Hawaii. So the threats to the U.S. are not ending, even including the Pacific here. So lots to talk about this evening. Let's get started, though, on taking a look at what is happening in the Atlantic right now. And once again, Tropical Storm Bertha, now Tropical Depression Bertha, with maximum sustained winds at 35 miles per hour with a minimum pressure of 1,007 millibars. And now Bertha is going to rain itself out over Texas, and we will see rain here for the Texas coastline, spotty showers, and occasional downpours and probably some gusty winds as well. But Bertha is officially inland. It is no longer something major in terms of watching in the tropics here for a potential threat to the Gulf Coast, as that threat has already come to pass. But obviously, keep in mind of the potential for inland rainfall as well, which should not be too significant from Bertha here, but it is obviously a risk nonetheless. But nothing else being monitored by the National Hurricane Center just yet. Before we get to the Pacific, though, let's really quickly take a look at how Bertha is doing right now, satellite-wise. And once again, you can see the remnants of the low-level center now inland over Texas. And we're still seeing some pretty decent convective bursts occur inland right now, probably being helped by the fact that we have land diurnal maximum right now in terms of the daily convective cycle. So that's probably helping, some convection really pop off here. And as long as that happens, we're going to see probably some spotty thunderstorms and rainfall downpours here along the coastline of Texas, and probably some even stretching into the Houston area here, although it seems like most of it is to the west of there. But the tropical threat is now dying down as Bertha is now inland, and again, it's going to rain itself out and eventually die off completely in about a day or so. Moving on, though, to the rest of the tropics in the Atlantic right now. Again, nothing much being monitored right now. Not much action happening in, the Atlantic, not in the southeast coast or in the western Atlantic, and definitely not in the eastern Atlantic out here. We have some tropical waves churning along, and looks like there's one again, another particularly aggressive tropical wave, which looks like it is about to emerge off the coast of Africa, but none of them show signs of developing, and pretty much expected for this time of year. And given the type of year, once again, that we are looking at this hurricane season, you're probably not going to get much out of the eastern MDR until sometime mid to late next month, but that kind of typically is the case most years. But I will say, though, if there's any chance of development over the next few days in the Atlantic, and I'll show you that with the models in just a little bit, it might once again be off the southeast coast and closer to home. Probably not going to be a direct impact to the U.S., as it's probably going to be a piece of energy here that is going to be moving out to sea, but that is probably our next shot at watching if we might get any sort of quick spin up here in the Atlantic that adds another name or so. But again, I'll show you the models in regards to that in a little bit. So moving on to the Pacific now, you can see we have, much more activity here. Obviously, one of that being Hurricane Fausto in the Eastern Pacific here. And let's actually show you really quickly what is actually happening on the Tropical Weather Bulletin in the Pacific. And once again, you can see we have Hurricane Fausto, Category 1 hurricane, maximum sustained winds at 85 miles an hour. This one might be interesting, especially when it comes to Hawaii. So Fausto right now out to sea and in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, but maybe in the coming days, roughly around 5 or 6 days out from now, Hawaii might have to keep a close eye out here on Fausto, but there's still a little bit of uncertainty with that, but I'll show you the track forecast and guidance, model guidance, in just a little bit. And then we have Invest 98E here, which is, I'll get to that in just a second, but it's this area here in the Eastern Pacific, which you can see definitely has some spin with it. There's probably a building low-level center, and according to the National Hurricane Center here, 98E is very likely to become yet another tropical depression, tropical storm, probably, according to the model guidance, maybe even another hurricane here in the Eastern Pacific. And things are just going to continue to ramp up here over the next few weeks as the Eastern Pacific continues to churn as El Nino gets stronger. And regarding El Nino, we'll have a more in-depth discussion on that tomorrow, so make sure to stay tuned for that as well. But talking about Hurricane Fausto, as I mentioned, it might be something that we need to watch for in terms of interest to Hawaii over the next several days. And you can see that here, the 5-day track taking Fausto out right now to just east of Hawaii, and also slightly just to the north as well, but already in the 5-day cone, Hawaii is just starting to get inside the cone of uncertainty. So, and I mean, this generally is also aiming towards the direction of the islands of Hawaii right now. And I mentioned, and we talked about how Hawaii would likely have to deal with impacts this hurricane season, given the fact that the Eastern Pacific is very likely to be active, especially the Eastern and Central Pacific, given the pattern this year. So not particularly surprised that we might be potentially looking at a Hawaii threat already, and probably our first of what will probably be a few storms to at least, threaten Hawaii at some point in their lifespan. And taking a look at the model guidance right now, you can see most of the model guidance here, taking this on off to the west with a slight west-northwest bend over time. And once we get towards around 5-6 days out, you do see that a lot of the models here do bring Fausto potentially over some of the more northwestern Hawaiian islands. But there's still a little bit of uncertainty. This could still very much shift back to the south and maybe affect the Big Island, or, as what typically happens with these Hawaii threats, eventually they shift on off to the north and barely end up just missing the island to the north. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and the time frame anyways is going to be in the 5 to 6 day time frame range, which, as you know, in terms of hurricane tracking, that is eons, and a lot of things can change between now and then. But Hawaii may have to start watching out in the Eastern Pacific here, as they potentially might have a tropical threat brewing in the coming week. And the models, there's a little bit of uncertainty whether or not we'll see a direct impact or not, but in the very least, you should definitely take seriously the models showing at least the potential for a threat there. So while there's a little bit of uncertainty right now, and it's not guaranteed that we will see an impact directly here in Hawaii, you can also count it out as well, especially if a lot of the models right now are showing that potential solution. So all eyes here on Fausto in the next several days, and we will definitely be covering Fausto here on this channel, as after all, it will be impacting the United States, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people would want to have interests on that. So we will be monitoring Fausto here very closely over the next several days. On to the rest of the models now, starting off with the European ensembles here in the Atlantic, only going out to the next 6 days here, because the 18Z run only goes out to 6 days instead of the 0Z and 12Z runs, which go out to a full 2 weeks. And you can see nothing much in the Atlantic, but roughly around 5 or so days from now, you do see that the European is showing a few ensembles here off the East Coast, likely from another piece of energy associated with the front that breaks off and maybe tries to develop. And once again, these are the very common formations that we will probably have to look for throughout the season this year, given the kind of hurricane season we will be dealing with, and in general, early season we tend to see a lot of development occur from frontal origins off the southeast coast. So this is a signal that we will be watching closely. Not a lot of ensembles show development, but there is clearly a hint of maybe something happening here in a matter of a few days. So we'll see whether or not it happens. And does the GFS also show that signal as well on the latest run? Well, moving out in time here as we get towards around 7 days out, well, you could definitely see here around 6 to 7 days out on the GFS, there is a huge trough with a front that moves off the east coast here, and eventually, extending it a little bit beyond 7 days out now. There are some pieces of energy here that do show up along the front, as what typically happens, and then maybe one of these pieces of energy here try to consolidate a little bit, and this roughly happens within the next 7 to 10 days. So a little bit different than the European ensemble's time frame, but definitely something interesting here that is showing up on the GFS, and that happens within more than likely the next 7 days. So it would probably be towards the very end of the month, maybe as we get into early next month. But beyond that, across the deep tropics, especially here in the Atlantic, nothing much happening. Maybe occasionally we'll have 1 or 2 strong tropical waves which come off, but again, probably from now up until at least mid-August, other than the occasional spin up here in the Gulf, like we had with Bertha and Arthur, and maybe something that will try to develop here off the southeast coast. There's not really much areas to watch that would be favorable and permissive of development in the Atlantic. So beyond that, there's nothing very solid as of yet. In the Eastern Pacific, though, things are definitely going to remain active here. Obviously, over the next several days, we're going to be watching Fausto as it moves on off to the west-northwest. Eventually, that'll march off here into the Central Pacific, and obviously, it'll be something interesting for Hawaii, potentially down the road in about a few days from now. But then, obviously, we have Invest 98E here. More than likely will develop within the next 24 to 36 hours. And according to the GFS, this definitely becomes a strong hurricane. More than likely will stay just off the coast of Mexico here, so we're not looking at a direct impact just yet. But that definitely looks like a formidable hurricane here on the GFS. Maybe 98E might even be our first shot at becoming a major hurricane. And our second hurricane of the season in the Eastern Pacific, and very likely beyond this, as we head into early August, the hurricane train is just going to continue to keep on churning here in the Eastern Pacific. As I said, what happened? And that leads me to the last point that I want to bring to you guys tonight. The activity we're seeing now in the Eastern Pacific, it's really starting to turn up now. We have probably our third tropical storm coming up here, and it is very likely to continue. In fact, we'll probably get more active as we head into the month of August here in the Eastern Pacific, and Ben Knoll is highlighting that, or I think, what Ben Knoll highlights here probably, furthers that idea. A tweet he came up with today on Twitter. El Nino is expected to dominate through August with a sprawling standing wave of rising air anchored over the exceptionally warm waters of the tropical Pacific. This is expected to fuel several hurricanes and typhoons in the coming weeks. So not only are we looking at activity here probably ramping up in the Eastern Pacific even further, but the Western Pacific too is probably going to be producing quite a bit as well. And they're also already starting to get really hot now with typhoon activity over there. And especially with the El Nino aspect of the rising motion, that'll definitely be a discussion that I'll once again touch upon in tomorrow's video when I go in depth into El Nino. But it's, again, looking like how things have been looking like for the past few weeks. El Nino is going to continue to ramp up here, probably going to become a near record strong event. And of course, that is going to have its reflections on the tropics, and we will probably continue to see quite the activity persist in the Eastern Pacific as we head into next month, and again, probably going to ramp up even further. So lots to watch here across the global tropics over the next few weeks, and we will definitely be keeping an eye out on everything, especially if we do get land impacts including to places like Hawaii, which we might potentially be getting here in the next week here with our hurricane in the eastern Pacific with Fausto. But other than that, things are quieting down in the Atlantic once again now that Bertha is moving inland. But of course, we will watch to see over the next week or so if we're able to get another spin up somewhere in the western Atlantic or so. With that being said, though, I'm going to wrap it up for tonight's discussion. Once again, I apologize for uploading very late, but I promise you I'm going to have another video tomorrow, and I will definitely have a video tomorrow in which we will, again, more than likely be talking about El Nino quite a bit, and that is definitely going to come earlier in the day. So if you want, these tropical updates to come in the afternoon or at a more suitable time in which more of you guys will probably be able to watch, I will definitely try to upload tomorrow's video earlier. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I'm Danilo Evangelista. I will talk to you guys again tomorrow.